Good morning, everyone. Myself, Dr. Jagannathan from Orthopedic Department, Assistant Professor of Orthopedics. Today, I was topic of discussion, a topic of seminar is skeletal tuberculosis. I'll be talking about skeletal tuberculosis. Hope everyone is ready. Before starting, uh, I will be taking two classes regarding skeletal tuberculosis discussion. In the first discussion, I will be talking about some of the features of skeletal tuberculosis and some types of tuberculosis in different joints. Then I would be talking specifically about spinal tuberculosis, which is the most common form in the next class. Hope everyone is ready. I would be starting. I will be starting the discussion. My discussion goes on in this manner. I will be talking about skeletal tuberculosis incidence, and then a small features about the pathology, clinical features, treatment in a generalized manner, and then specifically I will be talking about joint tuberculosis, which is most common joints: hip joint, knee joint, shoulder joint, and the wrist joint. And then in the next class, I would be talking about spinal tuberculosis, which is the most common form, and then other bone involvement: osteomyelitis, dactylitis, BCG osteomyelitis, and rheumatism and tubercular rheumatism. I'll be talking about them in the subsequent sessions. First thing, I will be talking about general features regarding tuberculosis. We'll start. So first, I'll be talking about tuberculosis. But one thing I want to tell: tuberculosis is one of the infectious diseases. Before talking to this class, before coming and talking to this class, all whole orthopedics, depending is divided mostly trauma and cold orthopedics. In cold orthopedics, congenital conditions, neoplastic conditions, inflammatory conditions, and miscellaneous metabolic conditions are this is how we classify the diseases: congenital, neoplastic, inflammatory, traumatic, miscellaneous, metabolic, and any other diseases. I will be talking about infectious conditions in tuberculosis. In infectious conditions, specific infection is tuberculosis. Why this? We have to know about that specific infection. Tuberculosis it is very common in India, and when you come out of the you should be able to diagnose, and you should be able to treat per se, and at least you should be able to identify the disease entity. So to identify a disease entity, we should know something about the disease per se. So specific infections: tuberculosis, bone and joint. I'm only in the skeletal tuberculosis, bone and joint. After joint tuberculosis, you'll see more. Bone tuberculosis, you'll see less. With this a little introduction, I will be going to some of the things in this PowerPoint. First thing is I'm discussing about the incidence. Tuberculosis is one of the tuberculosis. This is a disease which has been described in previous. It has described in Atharvana Veda, Charaka Samhita, Sushruta. Everyone has described about the tuberculosis. That means this disease this is the oldest disease of the mankind, which is even noted in the olden days. Even in Egyptian mummies, tubercular lesions have been recorded. So that is the thing we have. This disease is present from the olden days, but still it is still continuing. We are not able to stop the disease progression. It requires a multidisciplinary team, multidisciplinary plan to control or to eradicate or eliminate this disease. So we have to know what about the disease entity. These are some of the historical aspects. 1882, with Mycobacterium tuberculosis as the causative agent of tuberculosis has been discovered by Robert Koch. Then in before Robert Koch, spinal tuberculosis, Sir Percival Pott. Pott is the one who has described lesions of tuberculosis in the spinal column, even in 1779, where there is disc-based destruction, vertebral body collapse, and deformity, progressive spinal deformity. All these things he has described even before the advent of discovery of the etiological agent. Indian stalwart is Dr. S.M. Tully. He everything that I was discussing and I'm telling is what was told by the Indian stalwart, Dr. S.M. Tully. Dr. S.M. Tully is credited for the evaluation of a regimen for the treatment of spinal and tuberculosis and osteoarticular tuberculosis, middle part regimen. That regimen you might know, you will know at later dates. This is some of the historical aspects. I will be talking now about incidence of the disease. See, tuberculosis is a very common disease. It is a high morbidity, even it has very high mortality also. It is a very common disease, where in the world about 30 million people are affected by tuberculosis. It has underdeveloped countries, it is morely seen. There are different predisposing factors which are told has caused all these disease entity to be more in underdeveloped countries. So about 3 million people die in the year, every year, and then there are six in India. There is about 6 million radiologically proven cases. Of them, 1 to 3% of the tubercular cases is skeletal tuberculosis. The tuberculosis, even though it is 6 million cases are there, other forms of tuberculosis are very common than skeletal tuberculosis. It doesn't mean that skeletal tuberculosis is a rare entity. It is very commonly seen. 1 to 3% of the 6 million considered very large entity. And then after extrapulmonary tubercular cases, it is a pulmonary tuberculosis, extrapulmonary tuberculosis. After extrapulmonary tuberculosis, about 10% of the extrapulmonary tuberculosis cases make up bone and joint TB. So now other thing is, in the bone and joint tuberculosis, spinal TB is the most common form, followed by hip tuberculosis, hip joint involvement, followed by knee joint involvement. Tuberculosis is seen in early first 3 decades of life. That means the first 3 decades of the life, incidence is high. The later half of the stages, incidence is there, but not as high as it's seen in the first 3 decades of life. Next, I have told there are many risk factors that have been taught or told regarding the incidence of the disease, which is high in underdeveloped countries, such as refugees, homelessness, intravenous drug abusers, alcoholics, HIV patients, poor nutrition conditions, or immunosuppressive conditions where there is a prolonged steroid usage, or in organ transplant recipients where a patient is on cancer chemotherapy. All these immunosuppressive conditions, these patients are at slightly increased risk for developing tubercular infection. This is what, based on the statistics and based on the studies, epidemiological studies, we have known that these are the population who are at increased risk. Coming up to it, the next thing I will be discussing about after the incidents, I will be discussing about etiology and pathology. So tubercular lesions have been described even in the spine or in many other joints. The causative agent has been described by Koch, Robert. So where Mycobacterium tuberculosis was the causative agent. Other causative agent is Mycobacterium tuberculosis bovis strain, and atypical mycobacteria were previously thought they are non-pathogenic. Only the human type of tubercle bacilli and the bovine type of tubercle bacilli were responsible for causing of the infection, of tubercular infection. But with after the HIV pandemic that has come in 1986, atypical forms of mycobacteria have also caused tubercular lesions both in skeletal system and also not only in the skeletal system but also in other non-skeletal regions also. So atypical mycobacteria is now considered as a pathogenic or is also considered pathogenic. Previously, only typical tubercular bacilli or a bovine type tubercular bacilli. Bovine type tubercular bacilli were very common because people used to drink unpasteurized milk. Now pasteurized milk has come, so bovine tubercle bacilli could be eliminated at least. Most of the cases that now we see are because of human type of tubercular bacillus. Atypical type of mycobacteria, like there are Runnian classification. In Runnian classification, atypical mycobacteria has been classified in various groups: photochromogens, photochromogens, rapid growers, and non-photo and other 4 groups. These Cancers, Marinum, Avium complex, and Scrophulaceum are the groups, rapid grower groups. They are one which was considered as an atypical mycobacteria. Maybe I am not 100% sure, but atypical mycobacteria it was divided into 4 groups: skeletal organism, skeletal system tubercular lesions caused by these are the following organisms. Now, the next point I would like to discuss is bone infection is always secondary to some other infection. Primary focus is there somewhere. This is only secondary form. If you go to the pathogenesis, infection initially starts either in the pulmonary region or in the lymph node region or in the abdominal cavity. From there, due to hematogenous spread, the infection spreads, and usually, as you can see here, infection usually is seen in the metaphyseal region. Metaphyseal region, this is the epiphysis, this is the physis, or also called the growth plate, and this is the metaphysis. Diaphysis, metaphysis, physis, and epiphysis usually starts in the metaphyseal region because of the hematogenous spread, because there is more amount of blood supply in the metaphyseal region. That doesn't mean that other forms of spread are not there. There is also description of other forms of spread by infectious spread from the soft tissue focus, spread from the soft tissue focus, or from direct implantation secondary to trauma or surgery. So this is the etiology. Coming to pathology. In pathology, in any tubercular lesion, the classical description that is always pathologically described is tubercle. There should be tubercle to tell it is a tubercular lesion. That tubercle is a microscopic picture. It's a microscopic entity, not a gross entity. So tubercle, grossly there might be some caseations, there may be some different in different organs, different things will be seen. In skeletal system, sometimes caseation can be seen, sometimes different manifestations can be seen, but microscopically there should be tubercle to tell it is a tubercular lesion. What is a tubercle? Tubercle means a lesion which should be comprising of uh, tubercular central caseation necrosis surrounded by epithelioid cells or the Langerhans type of giant cells, or by uh, other form of chronic inflammatory cells, predominantly lymphocytes. These are the lymphocytes. These are the Langerhans type of giant cell, and then epithelioid cells. What is epithelioid cell? Is a cell, and we have to describe all. We have to think. We have to see this picture to tell it is a tuberculosis. In this picture, there should be epithelioid cell. Epithelioid cell, if you look at this, it is a large cell with abundant cytoplasm, and nucleus is also not nucleus is vesicular. I mean dotted like. So the cytoplasm is abundant, nucleus is vesicular, and the margins are not that distinct. indistinct margins. So, this is a this is an epithelioid cell. Epithelioid cell is the characteristic feature of tubercle, not the Langerhans type of giant cell. In Langerhans type of giant cells, if they are seen very good, they are seen by because of the fusion of large amount of epithelioid cells. All will form Langerhans type of giant cells. So tubercle should have a central caseation surrounded by epithelioid cells, Langerhans giant cells, and lymphocytes. This picture should be there to tell it's a tuberculous. In this picture, again there can be central caseation necrosis can be seen or cannot be seen depending upon the host immune response. If the host immune response is good, that necrosis will be less. Okay, if the host immune response is good, the necrosis will be less. That means it is a fight between the immunity and the pathogenicity of the bacteria. If the bacteria is more pathogenic and immunity is less, the caseation will be more and the necrosis will be more. If the body's immunity is more, then proliferating type will be more. The central necrosis will not be there, and only proliferation of the epithelial cells, lymphocytes is seen. Granules will be seen. So the next thing I want to say is, depending upon the immunity response, exudative type of lesion can be seen and proliferative type of lesion is seen. Usually immunity will be good in if the immunity is less, exudative type of lesion will be seen. What I want to say is, in some type, if there is a hip joint tuberculosis or a knee joint tuberculosis or even spinal tuberculosis, caseation will be more. But in a shoulder tuberculosis, proliferation will be more. Even at even by it doesn't mean only immunity. Also, other factor. Immunity only plays a role in this. It is not like that. Other factors are also present. Shoulder tuberculosis, which is also called as Kari-Shika, but where Kari-Shika, SICCA, Kari-Shika, where shoulder tuberculosis, the predominantly there will be no caseation, only proliferation of the epithelioid cells and Langerhans giant cells will be seen. So that is one picture I want to tell. Other thing is, if the necrosis is more, the necrosis tends to form an abscess, and the abscess tracks along the path of the least resistance, and it can be seen at a distant area from the original site of the. Suppose there is a spinal tuberculosis, you might see an abscess in the psoas region, psoas sheath, or you might, if suppose there is a cervical tuberculosis, cervical spine tuberculosis, you might find a swelling somewhere in the neck or somewhere in the chest. So the original lesion might be somewhere and the abscess will be seen somewhere. So you should not get into conclusion that the abscess is arising from the entity that you see. It might arise from the entity which is far away from the entity that has been seen. That is one thing I want to say. So regarding the pathology and etiology, I am clear. And now I will be going about the clinical features. Say tubercular bacillus, it causes infection. It is an infective condition. Whenever there is a infection, body will have some inflammatory response. Inflammatory response is by means of fever, or there are other signs of inflammation which we have seen: fever, redness, warmth, and loss of function. And fever, redness, warmth, fever, redness, and warmth will be there, and loss of function is the fourth one. Other one, signs of inflammation. But I want to say one thing: the disease entity is not as fast as seen in other infections. It is an insidious onset. That means it takes a duration of illness is slowly or gradually it will be progressing. That doesn't come in suddenly. Onset will be insidious, and progression also will be gradual. It is not that sudden onset and sudden progression will not be seen in these conditions. Fever, weight loss, appetite loss, and evening rise of the temperature. These are the constitutional symptoms usually seen in tubercular lesions. Fever, because there will be fever with evening rise in temperature. As just a small point, many infections causes rise of temperature, but in tubercular infection there will be classically in evening rise in temperature that is usually seen in temperature charts when we go on the bedside, when we see clinics, bedside clinics, when we see daily, there will be peculiarity, the temperature will be rising in the evening. This explanation that was given is because of the cortisol levels which are high in the morning, which suppresses the interleukin 1 and ectodermal necrosis factor alpha, which are mainly responsible for causing a fever. Means certain cytokines released by the body immune response, that means by the macrophages or by the neutrophils or by the um, now in the modified macrophages, modified monocytes, even the septular cell, they release some cytokines. These cytokines tend to act in the hypothalamus. Somehow they act in the hypothalamus and they increase the body temperature. If the interleukins and the tumor necrosis factors are high, body temperature will be more. But there is a mechanism where where cortisol levels are early morning 4 to 10 o'clock will be very high. So cortisol levels are high. So interleukin 1 and 2 necrosis factors get inhibited by means of this cortisol levels. And the explanation that is given is evening rise of temperature can occur because of this cortisol levels inhibiting the interleukin 1 and tumor necrosis factor. Weight loss, appetite loss. Whenever there is weight loss and appetite loss, that means whenever there is chronic inflammation any point in the body, this is a chronic inflammatory condition. So whenever there is a chronic inflammation, that means there will be some cytokines that will be released. These cytokines act again in the some in the hypothalamus, some in the adipocytes, resulting in loss of appetite and loss of weight. It is all a chronic inflammatory condition. There will be definitely weight loss, and in not only in the tubercular condition, any chronic inflammatory condition, weight loss and appetite loss is expected because of the cytokines that are being released. The next thing is whenever an organ, suppose a bone is in, suppose a bone and joint tuberculosis, suppose a joint, knee joint or a hip joint or a spine or ankle or wrist or elbow or some other joint is involved, that there will be some symptoms localized to that joint that will clinch us towards diagnosis. First thing that comes is these four: pain, swelling, deformity, and limitation of movements. Anywhere any joint is gets involved, whether it is inflammatory pathology or non-inflammatory pathology. And there is mainly inflammatory pathology, there will be pain, swelling, deformity, and limitation of movements. So pain might be because of many factors. Suppose if it's any joint that gets involved, which is very rich in nerve endings, and the nerve endings gets exposed. I mean, suppose the cartilage is damaged and underneath subchondral bone gets exposed. That is very rich in nerve endings, and then they will be giving responsible for generation of pain. Swelling is because there are many mechanisms for generation of pain. Not only that, the cartilage degeneration is responsible for pain. There are many mechanisms. Whenever there is swelling, whenever the swelling causes the stretch of the capsule. Capsule is a pain. Capsule is also pain sensitive. So there are some ligaments which are some ligaments which might be in the joint. They might also get irritated. There is many mechanisms for pain generation in any inflammatory conditions. One of some few conditions I have told: exposure of the subchondral bone vessel, nerve endings, or the stretch of the capsule or stretch of the ligaments. They are one of the responsible for pain generation. Swelling is definitely expected. Why? Because it's an inflammatory pathology. As definitely there will be vasodilatation. Vasodilatation causes increased permeability of the capillary membrane and not only uh, not only fluid, even the proteins also come out from the blood vessels, and they cause further osmotic pressure, and further increase in swelling. Once the swelling occurs, there will be body's natural mechanism whenever is to uh, whenever the body whenever a joint is involved, body's natural mechanism is to stop the movement, to reduce the pain, or to reduce the mobility, or the cartilage rubbing. There will protect the spasm of the muscles. So whenever the protective spasm, one group of muscles is more in more spasm, and the other group of muscles are in less spasm, or one group is more sorry one group is more and less, other group is mm, less involved, then the group which is having higher power will act more and resulting in mild deformities. Those deformities, because of the muscle spasm, are correctable. If the deformity is not, because sometimes if the disease entity progresses, if the disease entity progresses, the deformity, uh, if the the disease entity progress, there will be destruction not only of the cartilage, the ligaments inside the bones, inside the joint can also get involved. Once the ligament weakness occurs, the stability is lost, and opposite forces for correcting a deformity will be lost, and definitely the joint will be in a deformed position. Those deformities uh, might not be correctable. Limitation of movement, as I explained, it's a protective muscle spasm that will help in limitation of movements. Then tenderness, this is the classical feature. Tenderness is one of the feature of inflammation. So local tenderness is because of um, inflammatory mechanism. And then when the disease gradually, these are early stages, when the disease usually progresses, then other signs will come, that is sinus formation, ulcer formation, abscess formation can occur. And in tuberculosis there will be regional lymphadenopathy, because the regional lymphadenopathy, suppose of the specific joint, lymph nodes will be enlarged. These are the clinical features which can be seen in tubercular infections. Investigations, this is one entity where we have to learn in generally in any infection there will be chronic diseases. Anemia of chronic disease will be there, hemoglobin will be less, anemia will be seen. Any chronic disease, anemia because of anemia of chronic disease, or sometimes because of iron deficiency, or sometimes because of other nutrient deficiencies, somehow there will be anemia, definitely because of loss of appetite, loss of nutritional anemias can occur, or because of chronic disease, anemia of chronic disease can occur. That is, it cannot clinch to a diagnosis, but it will tell that it is a chronic inflammation that is going on in the body. Confirmatory, the total count will be elevated, ESR will be elevated, and CRP will be elevated. Why the total count will be elevated? Because the body is trying to fight the infection. First mediation that comes is B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes. Those lymphocytes are the ones that are responsible for chronic inflammation. So body will try to bring lymphocytes from thymus or from the other areas, lymph nodes. So lymphocyte count has to increase. Since the lymphocyte counts has increasing, that means automatically there will be a reversal in differential count. Usually neutrophils will be high in a chronic inflammation, lymphocyte count will be high, and the neutrophil count will be less. When we count 100, when we count 100 cells, lymphocytes will be high, neutrophils will be less. Total count definitely will be the WBC total count, total WBC count will be elevated, definitely. And then mm, and then ESR can be uh, is elevated, why? Because ESR, erythrocyte sedimentation is high. That means we count the yeah uh, whenever what happens is ESR, the RBC, the fibrin, the end stage of any inflammation will be fibrin that will be formed. This fibrin is it is a negative molecule, negative anionic molecule. So an anionic molecule. So what happens? It causes erythrocytes to clump, form as a clump, or it's called as Rolex formation. So erythrocytes clump a clump with it easier. So once the erythrocytes clump easier, they will be heavier. When they become heavier, they will sediment at a faster rate. So uh, the column above is definitely elevated. So yes, whenever we count for usually ESR is taken at 1 hour. The the rate of sedimentation is very high because chronic inflammation causing faster rate of sedimentation, and usually it will be above 100 in untreated infections. And the other advantage of ESRA, whenever we are taking the treatment, if every serial ESRs will help us whether the treatment is working or not. Treatment is not working. The ESR level should come down when we start treatment. That is the advantage with ESR. Same thing with CRP. CRP is also a acute phase reactant protein. It gets elevated immediately after infection. ESR takes some time to get elevated, but CRP immediately gets elevated. Usually it will be above 6 milligrams per deciliter. So CRP elevation is one of the indicator of infection. Now in investigations you have to go for renal function and liver function, because the drugs that we are giving, which we are giving now at this might be varying as you come up to treatment level. The drugs will get eliminated in our body either by kidneys or by liver. So we should know that liver function and kidney function before prescribing the drugs, because they are not on there are many toxic effects for the drugs that we are giving. So to baseline function of renal and liver has to be done before instituting treatment. In any case of skeletal tuberculosis, chest X-ray has to be done, because usually it is the pulmonary tuberculosis that is the focus of infection. Concomitantly, skeletal tuberculosis and pulmonary tuberculosis can also be seen, but not in every case, but 10 to 20% of the cases. Concomitant pulmonary tuberculosis can also be seen. So chest X-ray is mandatory for investigating a skeletal tuberculosis patient. And even though we are having a skeletal tuberculosis, not as pulmonary tuberculosis, sputum for AFP and Gram-Stein is to be shunt as a routine. Even though the tuberculosis infection is in the skeleton, we have to screen chest with an radiograph. Sometimes radiographs might miss, so we should have a sputum for AFB and Gram-Stein. And in investigation, we have to go for the radiographs of the involved joints. Okay, involved joints will tell us some features. In the radiographs, we can pick up some lesions which are suggestive of tuberculosis. But confirmation cannot be done by radiographs or by CTs or by MRIs or ultrasounds. It is only biopsy or by biopsy and culture of the organism, which is the gold standard for diagnosing an infection of tuberculosis. CT scan role. What happens in spinal tuberculosis? There are areas like craniovertebral junction, cervical dorsal junction, and that means a junction between the cervical vertebra and the dorsal vertebra, and the junction between the lumbar and sacral vertebra, or sacral tuberculosis, or SI joint tuberculosis, or rib tuberculosis, or sternal tuberculosis. All these tubercular sites, radiographically, they are very difficult to image. So these difficult areas can be easily seen in CT scan. So role of CT is not routinely done, but CT scan is not a routine investigation for tuberculosis. But in identifying certain areas, we will be going for CT scan. And the CT scan also helps in telling the lysis perfectly. Suppose osteomyelitis of the bone is present, and X-ray is not that good as CT in detecting the lysis. So in that areas also, lysis means radiolucency. Infection. Lysis means infection eating the bone. that eating up the bone is lysis is classically seen in CT scan more better. So these are the when we are want to see the lysis amount of lysis, then we go for CT scan, or we want to see these difficult areas, we go for CT scan. Routinely we won't go for CT scan. MRI is a very good investigation. Bone edema and soft tissue involvement can be very goodly seen in MRI. In a spinal tuberculosis patient, radiographs will not give that much good picture about the soft tissue involvement. So soft tissue surrounding the bone in the spinal tuberculosis, MRI will give a classically very good zone. And even in the even in the vertebra, I will be discussing at later stage, pre-vertebral destruction. That means before the vertebra gets destructed, there will be bone edema, bone marrow edema, which can be seen in MRI very clear, very better. That means before the radiograph can be seen, before seeing anything in the radiograph, MRI can help us in early diagnosis. So MRI has a very good role in diagnosing spinal tuberculosis. Ultrasound role is only for some conditions like tenosynovitis of the wrist, or to know about the abscess in the psoas region. Ultrasound is usually seen. Is usually a role of ultrasound in skeletal tuberculosis is to know about the tenosynovitis in the wrist. That means inflammation of the tendon sheets, inflammation of the synovial sheets around the wrist. Usually we will go for ultrasound, or to know about the abscess that has formed in the psoas muscle. Even though skeletal tuberculosis, there will be lumbar spine involvement, abscess can be tracking into the psoas sheet. For that, we want to know, you will go for ultrasound. And you can even in ultrasound guided biopsies also can, ultrasound guided aspiration can also be done. CTs can also, there is other advantage. If you want to go for biopsy, see, under the guidance of CT scan, we can go for biopsy. That is other advantage of CT scan. Montauk test, role of Montauk test. Some people say it is not necessary to go for Montauk test at this days, but Montauk test is a good test. Even nowadays, if it is negative, it indicates that a tubercular infection is less likely. But there are many cases of false negative reports in immunosuppressive conditions. There will be false negative reports. So usually Montauk test positive report doesn't help doesn't tell that it is a tubercular infection, but the patient has been exposed to tubercular bacillus. That's what it will tell. Whether the tubercular bacillus exposure is the cause of the infection now, that cannot be detected by Montauk test, but it will tell that the patient is exposed to tubercular bacillus. If it is negative, it indicates that the patient is not exposed to tubercular bacillus. That is the advantage. But negative is not always specific in this. Negative, false negative is also seen in immunosuppressive conditions. So Montauk test as an investigative role is not is debated. Now, culture, the gold standard investigation is in isolation. You culture the bacilli. Culture media, Lowenstein Jensen, solid media, which we use in generally Lowenstein Jensen media, and the Middlebrook media. These are egg-based media. So in Lowenstein Jensen media, it takes 6 weeks for the bacilli to grow. So you have to wait 6 weeks for the bacillus to grow, and under 1 month for to know the drug sensitivity and testing. That means to know the diagnosis of tuberculosis, you take roughly 2.5 months. So you cannot wait 2.5 months in a tubercular infection before. But it is an investigation which helps in gold standard investigation. That means it is the best investigation, culture investigation. But since we cannot wait 2 to 6 weeks, these many investigations has come. There are some investigation liquid-based media like Bactec media, which reduced the amount of time from 6 weeks to a week or 10 days. Bactec, but the cost of that medium is very high, and the drug sensitivity is also drugs. Liquid-based media, cost of that is very high, and Bactec, even though it reduces, it is not that as good as culture media in a solid media. Now, from days, weeks to days, from days to hours, we have come. PCR based tests have come, like cartridge based nucleic acid amplification test, gene expert test. Many PCR based test has come, which detect the tubercular bacillus within when tell us about the given the drug sensitivity within 1 hour. So from days to hours to minutes, we had from weeks to days to hours we have come based for investigating the tubercular bacilli. Serological, there are some serological tests like interferal Gram1 response assay and TB quantifer on gold. Those assays will also help in uh, diagnosis of infection. So coming to treatment. In treatment, the first thing we have to do is we should improve the general condition of the patient. You always ask in previously they used to keep the patient in sanatoriums. That means they used to keep for exposure to fresh air, they used to keep the patients in different sanatoriums. If you But now sanatorium treatment is not there. We main condition for skeletal tuberculosis, you have to give rest to the involved part, improve the general condition, give him rich diet, nutritious diet rich in vitamins and which includes milk, egg, and hematinics and vitamins. Hematinics means which help in increasing the blood RBC count. Iron-rich diet or vitamin B12 and B6 rich diet will all help in increasing the general immunity of the patient. For local treatment, we have to correct the deformity because of the muscle spasm. What we do, you give a skin traction or give some splint, or um, you give a splint or an traction to the involved limb or involved joint or involved bone to reduce the pain or to reduce the muscle spasm. This traction or splinting of the involved joint will help in minimizing the destruction of the articular surface and also helps in sometimes preserving the joint mobility. The entire crux here, what I want to say is, in any skeletal tuberculosis, if you diagnose early, you can improve the outcome of the patient. If you diagnose late, even with the best treatment, the outcome will not be satisfactory. So, in tuberculosis, you have to diagnose it early. Whatever means, or better by biopsy or by investigation, whatever you choose, whatever investigation modality is chosen. If the diagnosis is early and the treatment is instituted early, the patient outcome improves very much. He will have a near normal outcome. If we diagnose the disease at a later stage, in any form of skeletal tuberculosis, what happens is you cannot reverse the entity. There will be some morbidity which the patient has to live. So early diagnosis and treatment is to be is to be given for good outcome. Local treatment forms I have told, and then chemotherapy, drugs comes on. Chemotherapy comes and goes. That means I mean to say, regimens come and go. Regimens are daily day by day. Newer regimens are getting included. Newer regimens are getting coming, and older regimens are being gone. Everything. So whatever it is, we have to know what are the drugs, first line drugs, second line drugs, and in future there will be many other drugs that might be coming. But at present, skeletal tuberculosis duration of illness, duration of treatment is 12 to 18 months, which is longer duration of illness. And that chemotherapy which we give is multiple drug therapy. The first line drugs like rifampicin, isoniazid, pyrazinamide, etamitrole, and streptomycin are the first line drugs. So the other drugs like the fluoroquinolones, injectable agents, oral bacteriostatic agents, other agents is coming on. Second line drugs, why these are coming on? Because drug resistance to the is to the rifampicin and isoniazid, and even the first line drugs has been recorded. Not only drug resistance to multiple drugs, extremely drug resistant forms, multiple drug resistant forms, all the mono drug resistant forms of tubercular bacillus has come. So the disease entity, if the drug resistance is coming more and more, that means we will not be able to eliminate the disease, or our main aim is eradication of the disease. But for that, from control, elimination and eradication, we are in elimination phase right now. It requires a huge amount of support and huge amount of discussion and education, patient education. Drugs come and go, drugs come and go. You think rifampicin will be resistant, will not have a resistance, but a few days again there are strains that are being to resistant to rifampicin, isoniazid, pyrazinamide, etombitol, everything. So multiple drug resistance has come. Treatment is still evolving. But what we have to know at present now condition is chemotherapy for anti-tubercular drugs is there, and the duration of illness is 12 to 18 months. If the patient takes the available drugs at present now for 12 to 18 months, his morbidity will be drastically reduced, and you can sometimes reduce the mortality will definitely be reduced. Even sometimes the morbidity can be gradually reduced to a lesser extent. Surgical role. See, the role of surgery in tubercular infection is only to confirm the diagnosis. That means you want to take a sample and get it cultured. That is one thing. And to prevent the complications. That means if the patient has developed complications of the disease, that is at a later stage. If the patient does not come at the earlier stage, the complications does occur. When we have to manage the complication, that is when surgical role will come. And other role of surgery is to reduce the amount of disease entity. That means if the synovium is involved more, if you reduce the amount of remove the synovium, the amount of damage to the joint will be less. This is not possible always, but in some joints it is possible. So role of surgery in skeletal tuberculosis is to confirm diagnosis or to manage the complications of the disease or to reduce the joint damage in some condition by clearing the lesion. Okay, this is the discussion about general tuberculosis. General tuberculosis. I will be talking another 10 minutes regarding the tubercular hip and tubercular knee. And then in the next class, I'll be discussing about spinal tuberculosis, which is the most common form of tuberculosis. Tuberculosis of the hip and knee are second and third. Tuberculosis of the spine is the main thing. Next thing is other rare joint fights. Also, I will be discussing in the next class. In this final 10 minutes, you need not worry about this, because everything is, I have discussed everything in the general features of general tubercular disease. I have discussed many things. Other in individual joint involvement, there are specific things which have to know, which will clinch in diagnosis. That is why we have those things. If you know, that means you will be able to treat the disease, treat the patients with confidence. Now, I'll be talking about hip tuberculosis and knee tuberculosis. Now, hip tuberculosis, I have told, it is the next common form after spinal tuberculosis. 8%. This is 8%. Most commonly seen in children, and the tuberculosis of the hip is always a secondary focus. Pathology. Now the lesion will be either in the bone or in the synovium. If it is in the synovium, there will be synovial thickening and hip joint effusion. If it is in the osseous bone, there will be bone destruction more. Once the bone gets destroyed, cartilage also gets elevated, and cartilage destruction and joint damage will occur. So, which form is more common in hip tuberculosis? Destruction by means of in the osseous form is more common rather than synovial form. In the osseous form, you can see where the hip focus of infection, where could be the focus of infection in hip joint tuberculosis. That means the primary focus is in the lung. The next focus could be seen either in the epiphysis or in the metaphysis or in the greater trochanter or in the trochanteric bursa or in the acetabular roof. These are the 5 sites where commonly joint articular lesion can be seen. There is one thing which is called in the epiphysis, this region in the metaphysis or epiphyseal junction. is one region where it is called a Babcock's triangle, and this is one of the Viva question. Usually, the hip tuberculosis, it is a site for one of the site for hip tuberculosis. Other Viva questions that we usually asked are in hip. There are three triangles: Babcock's triangle, Watts triangle, and Fairbanks triangle. Hip tuberculosis, Babcock triangle is one of the site where it's a radiolucent area. It is usually Babcock's triangle. It's an X-ray finding. It's a radiolucent area in the inferior aspect of the neck. In the inferior aspect of the neck of the femur. Yeah, that is a radiolucent area. It is one of the area for infection. Watts triangle and Fairbanks triangle that you will be seeing in other cold, other sign, other when we are discussing other cold orthopedics, we will know. But now for this hip joint tuberculosis, Babcock's triangle is one of the area for osseous lesion. Same thing pathology. I have told destruction. What happens is hip joint tuberculosis lesion started in the bone. It gradually the infection eats away the surrounding bone. When it gets eaten by surrounding bone, and then inflammatory mediators come. Inflammatory mediators result in swelling. Swelling can be either in the bone or in the edema of the bone or in the soft tissue. Now, once the soft tissue gets swelling, periosteum reaction can occur, and periosteitis and periosteal reaction can be seen. And as the disease entity progresses, there will be cartilage necrosis, bone erosions, cyst formations, and joint space narrowing. All these are, and finally, what happens is there will be fusion of the joint called ankylosis. The ankylosis is not sound, that's fibrous ankylosis. It is not a solid ankylosis as seen in some other areas. This is the pathology. What happens again, I'm telling. What happens is initially infection with the destruction of the bone followed by periosteal reaction and periosteal reaction and soft tissue swelling. Later stages, joint damage, bone necrosis, bone and cartilage damage, joint space narrowing, and joint damage, and finally loss of joint space and ankylosing joint. Once the ankylosis occurs, sometimes there might be, see this ankylosis of the sites of cold abscess. Okay, this depends on if the infection, if the host immunity is good, that means there will be ankylosis. If the host immunity is less and the virulence of the organism is more, what happens is the necrosis part under this necrosis the joint or the necrosis part of the cartilage or the bone tracks along the part of the least resistance. It can be seen in the area at a other space. Usually, it is called cold abscess because the warmth is as compared to the septic arthritis sequel, the warmth is not that much, and low grade warmth is not that much. That's why it's called cold abscess. It can be seen in inguinal ligament, or it can be seen in the medial side of the thigh, or it can be seen in the femoral triangle or lateral aspect of the hip. What happens now? These findings which I am telling is when we see the case at a later stage. Early stage in hip tuberculosis, there are three types of stages. Any case, any joint, synovial stage of synovitis, stage of early arthritis, stage of advanced arthritis. This any joint, this is how the stages go. The stage of synovitis, where it is an early stage, treatment will be easy. Stage of advanced stages, joint destruction will be more, and cartilage destruction will be more, and the treatment is difficult. Wandering acetabulum. Look at wandering acetabulum is a late presentation. Here the everything is gone, even the joint is gone, and acetabular joint on the acetabular side and a joint on the femoral side is lost. So resulting in looking of a picture like a acetabulum is gone. This is called a wandering acetabulum. This picture I have told fibrous ankylosis. It is an ankylosed. This hip joint is ankylosed. That means there is no joint, complete absence of joint, ankylosed joint. Clinical features I have Describe fever, weight loss, appetite loss, loss of appetite, pain, swelling, tenderness, pain, swelling, deformity, and the limitation of movements. Those are the things which will be seen here also. But based on the limitation of movement and the deformed position, we can be able to say in which stage it is in the early stage or in the late stage. Early stage can be stage of synovitis, stage of early arthritis, or stage of advanced arthritis. Based on the limitation of movement and the deformity, classically we can tell them. We can tell. Here extrally I have told wasting of the muscles, gluteal muscles and thigh muscle. Wasting is a indication that it's a chronic inflammation. Insidious onset of weight loss, evening rise in temperature, pain, limitation of movements, limping, night cries. Sometimes what is hip joint tuberculosis can be referred to knee joint. Pain in the hip joint can be referred to knee joint because both hip joint and knee joint is supplied by a same branch of obturator nerve. So one of obturator nerve. So sometimes there might be hip pain, but with the patient hip problem, but the patient might complain the problem is in that he's having knee pain. When we examine the hip, the movements will be you have to describe some. There will be some inspect wasting of the muscles. Some movements will be restricted or movements will be limited, and some deformities can be seen. And sometimes the femoral head can is dislocated. Telescoping test can be seen. Based on the movement limitation, deformed position of the hip, different stages are described. First stage is synovitis stage. This is an early stage where the position of the hip is in a position of maximum capacity, that is flexion, abduction, and external rotation. Here, what happens is it looks as though limb is apparently lengthening. Here, look, this position. Here you can see external rotation. There will be flexion, abduction, and external rotation. You can see the abduction here in this picture clearly, and external rotation and flexion are not that much appreciated here, but still it is the stage of synovitis, flexion, abduction, and external rotation. And here the picture is representation. Here what we can clearly see is there will be looking like the limb is looking as though the right lower limb is looking as though it is larger than the left lower limb. So this is the stage of synovitis. Then the next stage, arthritic stage, what happens is there will be stage of apparent shortening. Look, the limb is looking like shortened, but when we square the pelvis, that means this pelvis, if we square it, again the limb length will be normal. So in stage of early arthritis, the position that we keep usually is flexion and not abduction. It is adduction and internal rotation. Flexion, adduction, and internal rotation, or the deformity is seen in early arthritis. Because in why is this? Because here articular cartilage is damaged. So to prevent loss, articular cartilage is involved. That is why there will be spasm of adductors. When the disease entity goes still further, the deformity that is described is same flexion, adduction, and internal rotation. But here the shortening will be not apparent. It is real shortening. That is because of the trochanter here and the trochanter here. If you compare, the trochanter has come up. When we square the pelvis, even after squaring the pelvis, this deformity, why? Because this deformity, the cartilage is gone and it has migrated up, resulting in shortening of the limb. So that is how. Sometimes it might not be like this. Sometimes what happens is in advanced stages, this hip might get dislocated and get this hip might get dislocated, and at this time also it can be seen on the iliac bone. That will also cause shortening. But in stage of advanced arthritis, there will be real shortening and some same deformity, flexion, adduction, and internal rotation deformity. Next thing is radiologically. X-ray, what should we know? I have told investigative protocol, same thing. Hemoglobin, TOSI, DC, ESR, and for every case of tuberculosis, the total count, TUC, ESR, hemoglobin. Next is LFT, renal function and liver function. Next, chest X-ray, sputum for AB and gram stain. All has to be sent. In the specific X-ray of the hip, we can see. How can we know? We can see this is how five-mistred a triad is described in the radiology of the tubercular hip, called as five-mistred triad. In it, where there will be joint space loss. Look at this case. Look here, the joint space, even though is reduced here, but still here it's completely absent. It is in very advanced stage. This is not an advanced stage. In five-mistred triad, there will be erosions of the joint space loss, and juxta-articular osteopenia. So it is the around the joint, osteopenia. That means bone around the joint there will be less amount of radiolucency. Next is joint space loss, juxta-articular osteopenia, and erosions. Erosions can be seen here also. Erosions of the joint. Erosions. Here the joint has completely lost here, and it's almost like a ankylosing joint here. Next is the same thing. Sometimes in advanced stages, look at this. The head of the protrusion, head of the femur is looking like a protruding into the stable. This is called protrusive stable, and completely ankylosed hip here. And protrusive stable. This is the joint erosions. I have for joint erosions. It can looking here. There will be no joint at all. Shanmugha Samudram classified hip joint tuberculosis based on the appearance of the femoral head and acetabulum on radiographs. The 7 types have been described. Here it is the normal type, traveling acetabulum type, dislocating type, fetish type, protrusive acetabulate type, heteropic type, and mortar and facial appearance. All these appearances are based on morphological appearances. But one thing I want to say, as the classification goes from type 1 to type 7, that means that the deformity is also very high in these cases. In type 7 mortal and pestilent appearance, we have very difficult to treat, and traveling acetabulum little better to discuss. Even traveling acetabulum is also a advanced stage of arthritis. In advanced stage of arthritis, if it is still going on further advancing to mortal and pestilent type, then it is very difficult to treat even surgically these cases. And that is the takeaway point from Shanmugha Samudram classification. Okay. Tuberculosis means that it doesn't come up like that. A patient coming with hip joint pain and limitation of movements and tenderness and some tenderness and loss of and deformed hips, you cannot come to diagnosis of tuberculosis. There will be definitely differential diagnosis could be in a younger age, Pettis disease. In a older age, younger age, Pettis disease, DDH, and hip arthritis. Hip septic arthritis, low-grade septic arthritis is one we have to go. Other psoriasis, sepsis, and rheumatoid arthritis in an older group is also a differential diagnosis. Treatment is same. I have general treatment which I have previously told, chemotherapy with ATT. Skin traction will help in reducing the muscle spasm and also giving a relief to the joint. Sometimes it helps in correction of deformities. Next thing is role of surgery. Role of surgery is only to confirm the diagnosis. When you how to confirm the diagnosis, take a sample somehow, give anesthesia and take by means of a needle or by opening the joint, take a sample and confirm the diagnosis, or to reduce the amount of disease entity, that is synovectomy. And partial joint debridement will help in synovitis stage. In synovitis stage, we can help in reducing the amount of destruction by surgery. In an arthritic stage and an advanced stage, complicated stage, there should be, we cannot do anything. We have to go for surgery to fuse the joint. That means we completely give a painless, stable, immobile joint. That means there will be no movements at the joint. To give a painless, stable, and mobile joint, it is very difficult in a tuberculous hip. Why? Because uh, fusion of the joint by intra-articular procedures is called arthrodesis. The arthrodesis was intra-articular procedures was used to be done previously, but now we are not doing intra-articular arthrodesis. Even extra-articular procedures are also not being done. We are leaving. um we are giving a painless, unstable mobile hip by means of giving a Guttelstone arthroplasty or trying to take hip replacement. In hip replacement, we can give painless, stable, and mobile hip. But in Guttelstone, we can give painless, unstable, but a mobile hip. Arthrodesis, we can give painless, stable, immobile hip. So, these are the treatment protocols in different stages of hip. So this is how we get different surgeries: Guttelstone prostoplasty, arthrodesis, and hip replacement. These are the stages where these are the things that is available for hip tuberculosis treatment. Treatment algorithm, which I have told you, is this: any hip tuberculosis hip cases, give ATT and skin traction. Patient might get relief of symptoms. X-ray will be taken, and joint destruction is less. You can joint destruction is less on X-ray. Mobilize the hip gradually by means of physiotherapy. The joint destruction is more and subluxation and etc. is present. Can we preserve the joint, or can we not preserve the joint? We do have to go to preserve the joint. Yeah, uh, different methods. If we cannot preserve the joint, normal joint function is not possible. There are different, either a hip arthrodesis or by Guttelstone arthroplasty, or total hip replacement, or arthrodesis. Arthrodesis, hip replacement, Guttelstone arthroplasty. These are the three things that are available things for um, tuberculosis of hip. When to do which treatment, when to go for hip arthrodesis, when to go for Guttelstone arthroplasty, when to go for hip replacement. Different things are there, but this is one of the idea that can be taken from this flow chart. Okay, I'll be stopping off at this stage. Tuberculosis of the knee joint and rear side tuberculosis and spinal tuberculosis I'll be discussing in the next class. If you have any doubts, um, you can message me.